Welcome everyone to the all-important round 6 clash from the FIDE Grand Swiss 2023. It's Vidit Gujrathi with the white pieces against Hans Niemann. And Vidit, as always, goes into his ritual of closing his eyes and focusing. When asked what does he do in this time, he said he would rather not reveal it. So we do not know what he does, what does he think. But his opponent is Hans Niemann. And Hans has played really well in this tournament. He beat Richard Rapport, he beat Shamshidin Wokidov. He is on 3.5 out of 5. Vidit, on the other hand, started off with a loss and then scored 3 back-to-back wins before drawing his last game against Evgeny Nair. And there he's back and he plays pawn up to e4. He pushes his pawn to e4. And let's see what Hans Niemann comes up with. Is Hans going to go for something very active, or will he play the super solid e4, e5? Hans also takes his time because, you know, Vidit can play e4 or d4, can also go c4, knight f3. He plays all the opening lines. But right now, both of them are very much attracted by the game on the next board between Shiro and Rapport. So they are looking there. But Hans now has a decision to make. He pushes his pawn to e5. So it's e4, e5. And with it brings out his knight to f3. It'll be interesting to see whether we get a Rui Lopez, we get a Italian. Knight comes out to c6. This will be exciting. And Vidit does go for the Rui Lopez. He plays bishop to b5. And Hans immediately questions the bishop. Do you want to take on c6 or do you want to move back? He goes back to a4. And now Hans goes knight to f6. Very classical play. Very normal. And now Vidit simply short castles it out. This opening has been played thousands of times at top level chess. And Hans goes for the closed variation of the Rui Lopez by playing bishop to e7. And Vidit plays rook e1. b5 played to push the bishop away, and now the bishop comes back to b3. Notice that black can go now d6 as one of the main lines, or could castle. Hans castles it out, which means that he is ready to go for the marshal in case Vidit goes c3. d5 is a pawn sack, so Vidit goes for a4, which is also known as the anti-marshal. Bishop b7 played by Hans, just so that the rook is defended. And now Vidit pushes his pawn to d3, a very solid opening. And Hans also pushes his pawn to d6. Generally, when you look at these structures, you would imagine that nothing special is happening. But white is putting the bishop, controlling the a5 square, so the knight cannot jump there. And now plays his pawn up to h3. And the knight goes to d8. This is a very nice maneuver. The knight can go to e6 and the pawn can move ahead. So Vidit takes the pawn. And I really like how Vidit deals with this. It's very instructive and a lot can be learned from it. So first, pawn takes pawn. And now the rooks have to be traded. So he takes rook takes a8. Now the bishop will capture the rook back. And Hans does that. And now the move that Vidit, you can see his time, he's still at 141, which means he's in preparation. He plays his knight to c3, putting pressure on the b5 pawn. Knight e6 played by Hans. He's looking at these two important squares and Vidit chops it off. Now you can't take with the queen because b5 is hanging. So that's the reason why pawn takes, solidifying these two squares and opening the rook's path. But this next move is fantastic. b4, fixing the weakness here on b5. Bishop b7. Hans says, I want to bring my rook over and control the a file for my rook. Vidit says, sorry, I'm going to take control of the a file and enter with the queen. Hans says, no chance in the world. He plays his rook to a8, attacking with its queen. Now the queen goes to b2. You can see with it 1 hour 42 minutes. He started off with 1 hour 40 minutes and now has 2 minutes extra on the clock. h6 played by Hans, and with it brings his rook to trade off another pair of rooks. This will be interesting to see if Hans takes it or not. He exchanges it. But now the downside is that after queen takes a1, Vidit has the free control of the a file. King comes up. Hans wants to keep all his pieces together. But now Vidit moves in and attacks the bishop. Even this pawn is attacked. You know that. But Hans quietly plays his bishop and tells Vidit, well, nothing much is happening. You know, I'm very cool here. And now Vidit brings his queen to a5, keeping these two pawns under attack. And Hans goes back to g8. Well, black doesn't have too many plans here. Bishop e3 is a nice move, because what Vidit might want to do is go this way and attack this pawn. King h7. Black is biding his time, trying to make some useful moves. Bishop a7 played. The game starts to get very interesting positionally. Will Vidit be able to put more pressure? That's the question. Bishop d8. Hans says, no chance. My bishop is defending this pawn. Queen a6. Vidit again, slowly like death, approaching the position. And Hans plays bishop e7. He's like, if you play bishop b8, I'll go back to d8 and defend it. Bishop b8 played by Vidit. And Hans plays king g8. You can see he's waiting there. He realizes that Vidit can attack, but he can defend. And what a beautiful move by Vidit. He's bringing in another piece from d2 to b3 to a5. What a beautiful maneuver there by Vidit Gujrathi. And Hans goes knight h5. He's actually trying to attack here. He wants to go to f4. Vidit stops it with his pawn to g3. But now Hans realizes that his only option here is to attack the white king. If he doesn't do it, Vidit's knight will come here and just completely destroy his position. So he goes queen e8. Nice move. The queen can move here, try to put pressure on the white king side, but Vidit starts to escape with his king. Whoa, what a decision by Vidit Gujrathi. King f1 played, very surprising move. Well, maybe what Vidit wants to do is start running away this way to b2, and he thinks his king would be very safe here. Very smart idea. King h7. But the problem is, if you start to run here at the right time, d5 may come in. So Vidit stays in the center with king e2. And Hans also waits with queen d7. King d1 played. And now knight goes to g8. What a waiting game here. Both players maneuvering around. Vidit plays his knight to b3. The only problem is that his light squares are a bit too weak. Will Hans be able to take advantage of it? He goes knight e7. Well, what is the knight doing here is a big question. Vidit now moves in with his knight here, attacking the bishop on c6. And Hans plays queen e8. And he's like, look, my knight defends here, and I'm ready to come out and attack your knight here. So Vidit goes and defends his king with his king. But d5, fantastic move by Hans Niemann. Lot of pressure now on Vidit. You can see he's down to 7 minutes on the clock. He plays knight d2, not a move that you make happily, especially because this check is coming in. This is fantastic. The point is, if you would have taken this pawn, there is a check and there's counterplay. So here Vidit goes back to e1, and now the bishop is hanging, so bishop d7 is played. Vidit goes queen b7, nice little move, putting pressure on the black queen side. D takes e4, not a good idea. Hans had a drawing line with queen h3, bishop e8 and bishop h5, but it was too difficult to spot. And now Vidit is better here. Even though Hans is going to chop off this pawn is not that relevant as much as white is going to get from chopping the c7 pawn. Yes, he takes it. And you will see that all these three pieces are not so well placed. So check on h1 played, and the king comes up to e2. And now queen h5 check. The king goes, he goes knight f3. He plays his knight there. And now Hans comes back with his queen. Now you can take off this pawn. That seems like a very nice juicy pawn to capture. Also Vidit has a lot of time. Yes, he takes it. Knight takes e5 is completely crushing this position. Hans Niemann is a pawn down. His pieces are very passive. He goes bishop c8. Queen b8 is a fine move, but Vidit takes his time and makes an error. Queen a7, because now knight g6 gets him counterplay. Very good move by Hans. If you take knight takes g6, queen g6 with counterplay, and he takes on d8. But now the point is black can take knight e5, and the game becomes once again very, very sharp. The reason is after knight e5, the queen can enter with the attack, and the queen and knight can be a deadly combo. Vidit goes queen c7, defending this bishop, attacking the knight. Hans gives a check. Fantastic move. And now what does Vidit do? His position once again, which was looking completely winning, is unclear. Hans must play bishop d7 with the idea of maybe getting the bishop to that side, and he is completely fine here. No, he was moving his knight. He gives a check. That is a blunder. It's a big mistake, because now the bishop here is trapped on c8. It can't do much, and that is big problem. It was very difficult to calculate everything. King c3 played by Vidit, queen h1, and you can see Hans' threat is if you take here, queen a1 check, and in fact it's black who checkmates his opponent. So that cannot be done. That cannot be done. Vidit can't take it, but he has the right move in mind. King b2, and now the bishop is still trapped. Knight d2 with the idea of check, and is it a mate? Whoa, bishop f6. What a beautiful move. There's a mate threatened here, and most importantly, the bishop is going to defend here. Like after check, king a3, there's no more a check on a1 because the bishop controls that square, and you can see there Hans shaking his head. He knows that he's blundered there with knight d2, and Vidit so confident sitting there, and he knows that the win is in the bag, but he's still very focused for all counterplay that can happen on the board. This move, bishop f6, is such a pretty move because it threatens mate in one, and it also defends on the other side. That's how powerful this move is, and Hans Niemann can't do anything here. I guess maybe resignation is on the cards. He has 5 minutes 50 seconds. He fought really well in this game. However, Vidit was the one who made the second to last mistake. It was Hans who made the final one. He gives a check with the queen. Of course, you want to go king a3, and that's exactly what he does. He goes to a3, and now there's no check on a1, so he gives queen c1 check. But now the bishop can come back to b2 exactly. That's what he plays, and resignation by Hans. What a game this was by Vidit. A positional dominance there, but Hans really fought hard. In the end, it was victory for Vidit, who played really, really well and has moved to 4.5 out of 6 with the rest day coming in. A big victory for the Indian 29-year-old Grandmaster.